In September 1943, the armistice between Italy and the Allies shattered the nation, creating a landscape of profound instability and sudden, jarring violence. The country effectively split into two warring entities, turning the Italian peninsula into a brutal, chaotic battlefield where the front lines were constantly shifting. This division was not merely political. It was a deep fracture that tore through the fabric of Italian society, pitting neighbor against neighbor in conflict. In the south, the Kingdom of Italy aligned itself with the advancing Allied forces, desperately attempting to reclaim sovereignty and rebuild a fragile democratic foundation. The southern regions became a staging ground for the Allies, who moved slowly northward, facing stiff resistance from German defensive lines entrenched in the rugged terrain. Conversely, the north fell under the iron grip of the Italian Social Republic, a puppet state established by the Germans to maintain their strategic control. This northern regime, led by a diminished Mussolini, functioned as an extension of Nazi authority, enforcing harsh policies and suppressing any dissent against the occupation. The German military presence in the north was overwhelming, turning cities and countryside alike into occupied territories where the local population lived in constant fear. This geopolitical fracture forced Italians to choose sides, as the nation became a theater for a bitter, protracted struggle for its very future and identity. Families were often divided by the conflict, with brothers and cousins finding themselves on opposing sides of the ideological and military divide that gripped Italy. Amidst this deepening chaos, the Italian resistance movement emerged as a powerful force, uniting a diverse coalition of communists, socialists, Catholics, and dedicated liberals. These partisans were bound together by a singular, urgent goal: to dismantle the fascist regime and expel the occupying German forces from their ancestral land. Operating from the shadows, these underground fighters organized themselves into brigades, utilizing the mountainous terrain of the north to launch their daring guerrilla attacks. They engaged in sabotage against vital supply lines, blowing up bridges and disrupting communication networks to hinder the German war effort across the occupied north. The resistance was a complex tapestry of ideologies, yet they maintained a fragile unity, driven by the shared necessity of liberation from the fascist yoke. As the partisans gained momentum, the occupying forces responded with increasing brutality, viewing the resistance not as soldiers but as dangerous, lawless insurgents. The conflict soon descended into a cycle of violence, where every act of sabotage was met with swift and often disproportionate retaliation by the German military. Nazi and fascist forces began implementing a policy of collective punishment, targeting innocent civilians to terrorize the population into submission and silence. These brutal reprisals were designed to break the spirit of the Italian people, yet they often had the opposite effect, fueling further resentment and resistance. Massacres became a harrowing reality of the occupation, as entire villages were razed to the ground in response to partisan activity in the surrounding areas. The cruelty of these actions shocked the nation, highlighting the extreme measures the occupiers were willing to take to maintain their grip on northern Italy. Despite the constant threat of death, the resistance continued to grow, drawing in more volunteers who were willing to sacrifice everything for the cause of freedom. The partisans provided vital intelligence to the Allies, marking targets for airstrikes and helping downed pilots escape across the dangerous, enemy-controlled lines. This collaboration between the resistance and the Allied command proved essential in weakening the German hold on the peninsula as the war dragged on. Every skirmish in the hills and every act of defiance in the cities served as a testament to the resilience of those fighting for a liberated Italy. The struggle was characterized by extreme hardship, with fighters often lacking basic supplies, food, and ammunition, while facing a well-equipped and ruthless enemy force. Winter in the mountains brought additional suffering, as the partisans endured freezing conditions while maintaining their vigilance against German patrols and fascist militias. The ideological diversity of the resistance, while sometimes leading to internal friction, ultimately provided a broad base of support across different social and political classes. Catholics and communists, who might never have collaborated in peacetime, found common ground in the face of the existential threat posed by the Nazi occupation. This unlikely alliance demonstrated the depth of the national crisis and the desperate urgency felt by all who opposed the fascist and German presence. The propaganda machines of the Italian Social Republic tried to paint the partisans as criminals, yet the people increasingly viewed them as the true patriots. As the war intensified, the lines between civil war and conventional military conflict became increasingly blurred, creating a complex and deadly environment for everyone. The German command, frustrated by their inability to secure the territory, resorted to increasingly desperate measures to crush the spirit of the Italian resistance movement. This included the systematic looting of resources, which left the civilian population facing severe shortages of food, medicine, and other essential supplies for daily survival. The suffering of the civilians became a central feature of the war, as they were caught in the crossfire between the occupiers and the resistance. Yet, even in the darkest hours, the resolve of the Italian people remained unbroken, sustained by the hope of an eventual Allied victory and liberation. The resistance movement also played a crucial role in protecting those persecuted by the fascist regime, including Jews and political dissidents hiding from arrest. This humanitarian effort added another layer of danger to their mission, as they risked their lives to save others from the horrors of the camps. The courage displayed by these individuals remains a defining chapter in the history of the Italian struggle against the forces of tyranny and occupation. Every village that stood up to the occupiers became a symbol of defiance, proving that the spirit of the nation could not be easily extinguished. The German military, despite its technological superiority, found itself bogged down in a war of attrition that they could not easily win or control. The constant threat of partisan attacks forced the Germans to divert valuable resources and manpower away from the front lines to secure their rear areas. This strategic drain significantly impacted the German ability to hold back the Allied advance from the south, altering the course of the entire Italian campaign. The resistance was not just a military force. It was a movement that represented the collective will of a people fighting to reclaim their dignity. As the months turned into years, the intensity of the conflict only grew, with both sides escalating their tactics in a desperate bid for dominance. The stories of those who fought and died in the resistance became the foundation for the post-war identity of a newly unified and democratic Italy. Their sacrifices were not in vain, as they helped pave the way for the ultimate collapse of the fascist regime and the end of the war. The memory of the Civil War remains a sensitive subject in Italy, reflecting the deep wounds that were inflicted during this period of national trauma. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of democracy and the extreme costs that can be associated with the struggle for fundamental human rights. The legacy of the resistance continues to be honored, as it represents the moment when the Italian people chose to stand up against overwhelming oppression. The landscape of Italy, scarred by the battles of the past, still holds the echoes of those who fought for a future free from fascist rule. Their story is one of endurance, illustrating how a divided nation can find a path toward reconciliation through the fires of a difficult conflict. The partisan movement remains a powerful symbol of the capacity for human courage in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds and systemic brutality. As we look back on this period, we see the complexity of a nation caught between the past and a future that had to be won. The struggle for liberation was a transformative experience, shaping the political and social landscape of modern Italy in ways that are still felt today. By understanding the sacrifices made during these years, we gain a deeper appreciation for the values of freedom and democracy that were hard-won. The history of the Italian resistance is a testament to the power of unity, even when that unity is forged in the midst of war. It reminds us that the fight for justice is often a long and difficult road, requiring the commitment of many to achieve lasting change. Their collective efforts set the stage for a transformative struggle defining the nation's difficult path toward liberation and the end of fascist rule. Ultimately, the story of the Italian split and the subsequent resistance is a profound lesson on the enduring strength of the human spirit. The conflict between the partisan resistance and the combined Nazi-fascist forces quickly descended into a cycle of extreme and unrelenting brutality. As the front lines stalled, the Italian interior became a chaotic battlefield where neighbor turned against neighbor in a bitter struggle. The partisan movement, a diverse coalition of communists, socialists, Catholics, and liberals, emerged as the primary force challenging the fascist grip. Operating from the rugged mountains and hidden urban cells, these fighters sought to disrupt vital supply lines and undermine the puppet regime. In response, the occupying forces and their fascist allies initiated a campaign of calculated, cold-blooded terror to maintain their fading authority. This period was defined by horrific reprisals and systematic massacres, as Nazi and fascist troops targeted innocent civilians to crush the rebellion. The logic of the occupiers was simple and cruel: to eliminate the support base of the resistance by inflicting collective, indiscriminate punishment. Entire villages were burned to the ground, turning the peaceful Italian landscape into a site of immense human suffering and profound tragedy. The violence was not merely a tactical choice, but a deliberate strategy to spread fear and paralyze the population into total submission. Yet, despite the overwhelming brutality, the resistance continued to grow, fueled by a shared, desperate goal of achieving true national freedom. The partisans understood that their fight was not just against an occupying army, but against the very ideology of totalitarian control itself. Every act of sabotage or ambush became a testament to the resilience of those who refused to accept the fascist order in Italy. The northern regime, struggling to maintain control, relied increasingly on German military support to suppress the rising tide of partisan activity. This reliance only deepened the resentment among the Italian people, who saw their country being dismantled by those claiming to protect it. The partisan ranks swelled with workers, students, and former soldiers, all united by the singular vision of a liberated, democratic Italian state. They coordinated their efforts through clandestine networks, sharing intelligence and resources despite the constant threat of infiltration and betrayal by spies. The German response grew increasingly desperate, leading to even more frequent and savage attacks on civilian populations suspected of aiding the rebels. These atrocities, however, often backfired, driving more young men and women into the mountains to join the ranks of the resistance. The cycle of violence created a deep psychological scar across the nation, as the lines between combatant and civilian blurred completely. Families were torn apart by conflicting loyalties, and the social fabric of the North was stretched to the point of total collapse. The resistance movement became more than just a military force. It became a symbol of the nation's moral struggle for its identity. Every mountain pass and valley held stories of bravery, sacrifice, and the heavy price paid for the dream of a future liberation. As the war dragged on, the partisans improved their tactics, moving from small-scale sabotage to coordinated strikes against key infrastructure and communication. They became the eyes and ears of the Allies, providing crucial intelligence that would eventually pave the way for the final liberation. The fascist leaders in the North found themselves increasingly isolated, clinging to power only through the sheer force of their German masters. The dream of a social republic vanished, replaced by the grim reality of a puppet state serving the interests of a collapsing empire. By the final months of the war, the resistance had effectively taken control of large swathes of territory, challenging the occupiers openly. The eventual collapse of the northern regime became inevitable as the Allied forces pushed northward and the partisans launched their final offensive. The liberation of the major northern cities was a moment of catharsis, marking the end of this dark and deeply painful chapter. It was a victory bought with the blood of thousands who had fought in the shadows to reclaim the light of freedom. The end of the occupation did not immediately heal the wounds of the Civil War, but it provided a path forward. It left behind a complex legacy of sacrifice, where the memory of the fallen served as a foundation for the new republic. The nation had been torn apart, but in that destruction, a new sense of unity began to emerge from the ashes. Historians would later reflect on this period as the crucible of modern Italy, where the choice for democracy was made in blood. The stories of the partisans remain a vital part of the national consciousness, reminding every generation of the cost of liberty. Ultimately, the struggle against occupation and fascism defined the character of a nation that chose to rise from its darkest hour.